I received my early education at the Reno School. There was more than just a one-room country school like a lot of the small schools out in the country. There were 2 rooms downstairs. One room contained grades 1, 2, and 3, and the other room grades 4, 5, and 6. Upstairs, one room contained grades 7 and 8, and the other room contained all 3 years of high school. Then there was a small room used as a recitation room and office. I think there were 27 students in high school during my junior year, and there were only 5 in the graduating class. There are 3 of us that graduated in that class in 1936 that are still living. So this was a very small school. There were a coal-fired furnace located in one corner of the room for heat. And each one of the 4 big rooms each had a coal-fired furnace. Toilets were located outside, and there was still a horse barn located on the southeast corner of the grounds, and it was used by students riding or driving horses to school until about 1933. The gymnasium was built with WPA labor about this time and was the first gymnasium built in any small town in the area. And my understanding is that building cost about $14,000. I guess I was at least an average student, and I took the courses that were offered as there were no electives, not even in high school. When the weather was good, we walked the 1.5 miles to school. When the weather was bad, my parents usually transported us, sometimes in the truck, because it was not a hard-surfaced road, just plain mud in the wintertime. When the weather was ready to turn cold and freeze the roads, my parents liked to have a smooth road when it froze, so my dad would hitch 4 horses to the road drag and drag the roads all the way to Reno to fill up the ruts so the road would be fairly smooth when the ground froze. Then he would hope that no one traveled the road and opened up the ruts again before the ground froze solid. The road from our house to Reno, about 1933, was covered with gravel, and that was using WPA labor. As I say, those were Depression times in the 1930s, and times were pretty hard. Our family probably had it a little more better than some because my family owned their farm, and that was an advantage sometimes, except that you had loans on the farm and had to pay interest and payments on the loans. Trucks owned by local farmers were used to gravel the road, and the gravel came from the creek, north of Reno, from Yankee Creek. The gravel was all shoveled on and off the roads, as there were no dump trucks or power loaders. In talking about Depression years, I remember one time after I started farming, and I was talking to a fellow from the south part of the county, and he was telling about coming into the bank in Greenville and to make a payment on his loan, and he didn't have the money to pay, couldn't even pay the interest. And he walked in and he told the banker, he said, "Well, you're just going to have to sell me out. I don't have the money to pay it. Can't even pay the interest." And the banker told him, "We're not going to sell you out." He said, you'll get straightened out and you'll be able to pay it out. And so they stayed with him, and he was telling me, he was an old man when I was talking to him, he said, a few years I got on my feet again and got it paid off, and they stayed with me through those times. So that was the kind of times we had back in the 1930s. But there wasn't any dump trucks or power loaders, so all that gravel was hauled by hand, shoveled by hand, and with this WPA labor. And my dad had a truck, and he was so anxious to get that road graveled that before we went to school in the morning, he wanted to get a couple extra loads in. And so us boys would go with him before the WPA labor arrived, and we went up to the creek and we loaded up a truckload of gravel. And he dropped us off at school when we came back. So he got one load hauled before the help arrived. Then after they left in the afternoon, he picked us up at school, and we went up and loaded up another load and unloaded it. So he got 2 extra loads during the day. The 2 rooms upstairs in that school building were divided by a large door that raised up into the attic to make one large room. And then the room was used for plays and larger meetings. In this auditorium, as a freshman in high school, I had a small part in the school play as a carnival barker. The new gymnasium, containing a stage and 2 dressing rooms, so after it was built, why the plays were held out to the gymnasium. So it was used for a lot of things besides just playing basketball. High school graduation exercises and baccalaureate services were held at the Presbyterian Church before the gym was built, and in later years they were were held in the gym. Electric lights were installed at this time, and the power was produced by 2 gas-powered generators, and they were located in the schoolhouse basement. Now this was a direct power system. There were no batteries, so in order to have lights they had to start these 2 engines. And if all the lights weren't being used, they could start one engine and it would take care of it. But if they were using all the lights in the gymnasium for a basketball game, both of those generators had to be running. And that's what furnished the power until the REA came through several years later. In the 7th and 8th grade, we had a course called orthography, the study of spelling. And I was persuaded to enter the county spelling contest to be held at Sorrento. Genevieve Gwynn, who lived west of Reno, and I stayed after school many evenings to study new words. At the contest, she was first in the contest, and she went on to be first in the county. But I missed about 3 times as many words as she did, and I'm sure that all that extra study has helped me in later years, but I still keep a dictionary handy. I graduated from Reno High School in 1936, and I still have my high school ring that I got when I graduated from high school. I graduated from Greenville High School in 1937. At Greenville, I took a course in manual arts and learned to use tools well enough to do some rough carpentry work around the farm in later life. Also, the small amount of mechanical drawing that we learned taught me how to draw lines and draw to scale. That training helped me a lot in making zoology and botany drawings while attending college at Blackburn. I also had 1 year of agriculture at Greenville High School, and I'll never forget one thing that our ag teacher told us in class one day. He was from up around Mattoon, where they have a real deep, dark soil. They grow a lot of broom corn up there, and he didn't think much of Bond County soils. He said, "Boys, if you want to start farming, for goodness sakes, get out of Bond County." And I was surprised to hear an agriculture teacher say that. And like I say, he was born where the soils were a lot different, and he felt like the farmer couldn't make a good living farming this less productive soil of Bond County. I've always felt that farmers in Bond County just needed to be better managers, and those who are successful deserve more credit than those in other areas who have the advantage of a more fertile soil. I saw him one time many years later, and I reminded him of that, and he wouldn't admit that he said that. After high school, I decided to stay out of school for 1 year before going to college. Several persons advised me not to do that, as most persons who say that never go back to school. Maybe I just wanted to prove them wrong, but I did just that. And I did what I said I was going to do. Blackburn College was a 2-year school and had a work plan where everyone worked 15 hours each week to help pay college expenses. This was during the Depression, and the financial assistance was very helpful. My work assignment the first year was on the farm, where we had a dairy herd, some hogs, and a team of mules, and raised some corn, soybeans, and hay. I was selected to be the farm manager during my second year, and it was my job to make work assignments on the farm and supervise the farm operation. After graduating from Blackburn College, I would have gone on to the University of Illinois if I could have worked at the beef cattle barn, but there were no jobs available there, so I came back to the home farm. The end of the school year was celebrated with school picnics. This is going back to the grade school days. I recall in grade school we walked to the Fred Root pasture, which was located about a half-mile southeast of the school, and there we had a picnic lunch and then played games. In high school 1 year, we went to Newby's roller skating rink, located near Pocahontas, and it was known then as Whiteway Park. And we roller skated at that party. On the way to this pasture on the Fred Root place, we passed one of the last log cabins that I can remember. It was located about 200 yards east of the school on the north side of the road. There was a road that went from the schoolhouse east to the next road, and it never was surfaced. It was just a mud road and still is today. But along that road was located this old log cabin. I remember there that log cabin that was located, and then I remember another log cabin that was located on the Davis farm, about a mile northwest of Reno. This was in an area that was known as Pansy Hill because so many wild pansies grew there. Bessie and I visited that hill one spring about 10 years ago, be about 20 years ago now, and still found pansies. But of course the cabin was gone. There was another log cabin about 2 miles straight north of Reno where the Alexander family lived. Well, now let's move to my sports career. I really don't have a lot to brag about as far as my sports career is concerned, but I had a lot of fun anyway. I've always been interested in participating in sports. The fall and spring sports at Reno High School was softball. A team back then consisted of 10 players. The 10th player was a fourth outfielder and played what we called short field or rover. The coach usually put a good player there, and he was to field anything that he could get to. My position was catcher. When I was a sophomore, the Relitz family moved to the Reno neighborhood from East St. Louis. Carl Relitz was a freshman and a good pitcher. In the competition that we played, if you had a good pitcher and a catcher that didn't allow too many passed balls, you didn't have to have a good player at every position. We had enough good players so that we could beat any of the small surrounding schools from the surrounding small towns. During my previous year of high school, our coach put Greenville on our schedule. During my junior year of high school, our coach put Greenville on our schedule. Back in those days, the Reno Mercantile Company sold soda pop in big bottles that must have held about a quart for 10 cents. Before each game, my dad would tell Carl and I that if we won the game, he would buy us each a big soda. We played Greenville the first game, and they beat us, but it was a close game. Before we played Greenville the second time, my dad said he would buy each team member a big soda if we won. We won, and he did. We were really proud of ourselves to beat a big high school like Greenville. Our softball field wasn't quite as big as it should have been, so there were trees located in deep center field. Carl Relitz was our best hitter, and the opposing team soon learned that. In one game, Carl hit a ball to deep center field, and he watched it sail over the center field, and he circled the bases in a home run trot. And as he approached home plate, the umpire said, "You're out." Carl said, "What do you mean I'm out? It went over the tree." The umpire replied, "I know it did, but the center fielder was playing behind the tree and he caught it." I also played softball at Greenville High School and in a county league that played at the Sunny Slope Field that was located just west of where English School used to stand, and later at the Legion Field, which was located where the swimming pool is now. None of the schools that I attended played football, so basketball was our other sport. I didn't have a lot of talent and was always a poor shot, but was a good ball handler. And even though I was not very tall, I could outjump most of the opposition. So the coach had me jump center. Back in those days, we had a center jump after each basket was made. During my freshman year of high school, we played on an outdoor dirt court in the fall when the weather was good. That was before the gymnasium was built. I recall one game we played at Alhambra on their outdoor court, and since it took 2 cars to haul the team, I rode over there with Harry Clodfeller, who was a sophomore member of the team, and he drove his family's Model T Ford touring car. This was an afternoon game, and it was almost dark when we got home. None of the small schools had gymnasiums then, but some had indoor courts. For instance, Sorrento played in an auditorium on the second floor of the school building. It was so small that the free throw circle overlapped the center circle, and the ceiling wasn't much above the backboard. And Panama played in a town hall that was a little larger, but had heating stoves right next to the basketball court. We found out that our reflexes were better than we thought when we brushed against that hot stove. Reno was the smallest school in the area, and until the gymnasium was built, had no place to practice in bad weather, so everybody beat Reno. One game played during my sophomore year at Reno High School I will never forget. This was the first year that we played in the new gymnasium. And the bleachers were full. Of course, the bleachers out there weren't very big, but the whole town turned out for a basketball game. That was the social event of the week. We were playing Panama. And they had 3 years of high school, the same as Reno, but this was a coal mining community, and they always had good athletes and always had one of the best small school teams in the area. I don't think Reno had ever beat Panama at basketball. I was playing standing guard. Back then, the guards were designated either running guard, who helped advance, and the running guard helped to advance the ball down the court, and occasionally drove for the basket and took a shot. The standing guard helped to advance the ball down the court and never drove for the basket, but remained at near center court as a first line of defense if the opposing team got the ball. The player with the least talent played standing guard, and that was me. The game was close. The crowd could hardly believe what they were seeing. With only 1 minute to play, Panama was ahead by only 1 point. We were going for the north goal. Suddenly, I found myself with the ball on the left side of the court, about as far from the basket as the college 3-second line, about as far as the college 3-point line is now located. With no Panama player near me, I probably hadn't taken a shot all evening, so nobody expected me to shoot, and certainly not to make it if I did. But I shot, and the ball banked off the backboard cleanly through the hoop to put us 1 point ahead. The last minute was very hectic, but Panama could not score, and we had beat Panama. I also played basketball during my senior year at Greenville High School. My Aunt Edna Redfern always had definite opinions about everything, and she wasn't bashful about expressing them. Our family ate Thanksgiving dinner at Grandfather Baumberger's that year, and Aunt Edna informed me that in no uncertain terms that I was not going to come to Greenville High School as a senior from a little school like Reno and make the team. Maybe the squad, but not the starting 5. I didn't tell her, but by then we had practiced enough that I was pretty sure I would make the starting 5, and I did. And she never did apologize or congratulate me. She probably decided it wasn't a very great accomplishment, and maybe it wasn't, because I think we only won 5 games that year. I still played guard and very seldom scored any points. My last game, I think it was the last game, was against Vandalia late in the season, where I took 4 shots and I made all 4 baskets. My dad thought I should be shooting more, and he suspected the coach had been telling me not to shoot, which was not the case. I just never scored many baskets. During the year after high school, I played with the Reno Independent basketball team, still in the position of a low-scoring guard. Reno had some very good high school and independent teams for several years because of the Trobaugh and Huber boys. The Trobaughs had a basketball goal on the side of a barn, and somebody was shooting baskets there most of the time. There were 4 Trobaugh boys, Earl, Lawrence, Don, and Ernie, with nicknames Sis, Og, Snorky, and 60. The Huber boys, Earl, Joyce, and Robert, with nicknames Gur, Chio, and Toik. They lived about a block away from the Trobaughs and were there at the Trobaughs most of the time shooting baskets. They even put on rubber boots and played basketball in the mud. At Blackburn College, I made the squad, but played very little as a freshman. The next year, we had a new coach who played 5 men for a quarter and then put in 5 different players the next quarter, so I got some playing time. After 2 years of college, I returned to the farm and the Reno Independent team, still as a very low-scoring guard. That fall, I returned to Blackburn for homecoming, and I played in an alumni varsity game. For some reason, the coach played me at forward, and I scored 15 points, the high point scorer of the game, 4 baskets and 7 free throws. The high point game of my entire career. We got beat by 1 point, 27-26. The account of that game appeared in the Greenville Advocate, and one of the Reno teammates commented that Blackburn College must not have had a very good players if I scored 15 points.